Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more thrilling stories. The city was drenched in neon lights and shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Vanessa had always walked this line carefully. Working as the personal secretary to one of the most feared mafia kings in the country was no ordinary job. She knew the rules, the dangers, and most importantly, the fine line between keeping her life and crossing a line that could cost her everything. Yet tonight, something felt different. There was an electricity in the air that made her stomach twist and her pulse quicken, though she couldn't quite place why. It had started innocently enough. A casual coffee meeting with a client, a simple lunch that was supposed to be about business. Vanessa had dressed professionally, hair perfectly in place, makeup subtle yet elegant. But little did she know that even her innocent smile, her carefree laughter, and the way she casually brushed a strand of hair behind her ear would ignite a storm in her boss, Dominic, the king, Moretti. Dominic was a man who had everything: power, money, influence. But Vanessa had always held a peculiar power over him, a mix of admiration and obsession. He had watched her grow within his organization, proving herself capable, intelligent, and fearless in a world where fear was currency. But he had never seen her like this, laughing freely, completely unaware that someone else had dared to take her out, even for a casual meal. The moment he saw her enter the office after her meeting, he felt it, a sharp, blinding surge of jealousy that left his chest tight and his hands trembling slightly. "You went out with him?" he asked, his voice low, but laced with a dangerous edge that made the room itself feel colder. Vanessa froze mid-step, her mind scrambling to respond, to explain, but nothing came out. She hadn't even realized Dominic had been watching her, observing the way she smiled at another man, the gentle way her eyes had lit up. Dominic's usual calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by a storm that was barely contained. He stepped closer, the aura of power and danger radiating from him like a heat wave. Vanessa felt the shift immediately. The safe professional space she had always occupied was gone, replaced by tension so thick it made her chest tight. It was just lunch," she finally managed to whisper, though the words sounded fragile even to her own ears. "Just lunch." Dominic's voice was sharp now, cutting through the quiet hum of the office. "Do you think I don't notice when someone else looks at you the way I should be the only one allowed to?" His eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto hers, and Vanessa felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the Dominic everyone whispered about in fear, the man who commanded respect, who could crush anyone who crossed him. But tonight, his gaze was focused entirely on her, and it made her heart race for reasons she couldn't explain. Vanessa swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She had always admired Dominic secretly from afar. She had seen glimpses of the man beneath the ruthless exterior, the rare moments of kindness, the silent care he showed when no one else was looking. But jealousy was new. Possessiveness like this was dangerous. And yet, as she looked into his eyes, she realized it was also intoxicating. There was something raw, something real about it, and she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, even if it frightened her. Dominic didn't give her a chance to breathe. He closed the distance between them in a few long strides, stopping only when he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, not delicately, but with a firm, possessive gesture that made her stomach flutter. "Tell me," he demanded, his voice lower now, almost a growl. "Who was he? What did you do with him?" Vanessa's mind raced. Every word she considered seemed wrong. "It was nothing," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But Dominic cut her off before she could finish. "Nothing," he snapped. The word cracked like a whip through the room. He reached for her hand, gripping it firmly, not harshly, but with a power that left no room for argument. Vanessa's heart pounded. She knew the rumors about men and women who crossed Dominic. They didn't just vanish from the city unnoticed. And yet, here she was, the center of his storm, feeling an exhilarating mix of fear and something more dangerous: anticipation. The silence that followed was electric. Dominic's gaze softened just slightly, enough for Vanessa to catch a glimpse of the man beneath the king, the man who had been silently protecting her, admiring her, and yes, wanting her. But the jealousy, the possessive streak, it was still there, simmering beneath the surface, ready to erupt. Vanessa felt herself drawn to it, despite knowing the dangers. "Vanessa," he said, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you don't understand. I can't share you with anyone. Not lunch, not a smile, not a glance. You're mine. Do you understand?" His words wrapped around her like chains, tight but thrilling, leaving her both scared and thrilled in equal measure. She nodded, words failing her completely. She had known Dominic's reputation, had understood the dangers of working for a man like him. But she had never imagined feeling the intensity of his emotions so directly, so personally. And yet, as his hand lingered near hers and his gaze held hers hostage, she realized a part of her wanted this. Wanted him to claim her, to show her just how much he cared, even if it came with danger. Dominic's expression softened just a fraction, a shadow of a smile tugging at his lips, but the fire in his eyes never dimmed. "Good," he murmured, leaning closer until his breath brushed against her ear. "Because from now on, I don't want to see you with anyone else. Ever." Vanessa's heart raced, every nerve in her body on high alert. The office, the city outside, the world itself seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in a dangerous, intoxicating bubble of jealousy and desire. She didn't know what the future held, or how she would navigate the storm that was Dominic Moretti. All she knew was that tonight, something had shifted, something irreversible, and the line between fear and attraction had never felt so thin. And as Dominic pulled back just enough to look at her properly, that faint, dangerous smile still lingering, Vanessa knew one thing for certain. Her life, her heart, and her very world had just changed forever. The next morning, Vanessa arrived at the Morty headquarters with her usual calm professionalism, but inside, she was still reeling from the previous night. Dominic's words, his gaze, the possessive edge in his voice, they lingered in her mind like a fire refusing to die out. She knew the risks of letting herself think about him this way. He was her boss. A man whose temper and power could crush anyone who crossed him. And yet, she couldn't deny the thrill, the intoxicating pull she felt toward the dangerous aura he exuded. Dominic was already in his office when she arrived, seated behind his massive mahogany desk, papers neatly stacked but largely ignored. He looked up the moment she entered, and Vanessa felt a shiver run down her spine. His eyes, dark and penetrating, followed her every movement, calculating, possessive. The faint smirk tugging at his lips told her he had already replayed their confrontation in his mind countless times, and she was the center of it. "Sit," he commanded, voice calm but layered with an unspoken intensity. Vanessa obeyed, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She tried to focus on the files she carried, pretending to be the composed secretary, but Dominic wasn't fooled. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying her as if trying to decipher a secret code only he could understand. "Vanessa," he began, his tone deceptively casual, "last night you need to be honest with me." He didn't wait for her to respond. "Who is he? The man you had lunch with? Don't lie to me. I can see everything, even the smallest detail escapes me." Vanessa's breath hitched slightly. Honesty had always been her strongest tool, but now it felt like a weapon pointed directly at her heart. "It was just a business meeting," she said carefully, choosing her words. "I swear there's nothing more, he's just a client." Her voice wavered, betraying the tiny thrill she felt at being the focus of Dominic's attention. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he studied her face, his expression unreadable. Vanessa could almost feel the gears turning in his mind. The jealousy, the possessiveness, the quiet admiration he tried to hide from everyone else. Dominic finally leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his gaze piercing. "Vanessa, you have no idea what it does to me seeing you with someone else, even if it's just business. You belong in my world with me, not anyone else, not a client, not some stranger who dares to make you smile." His voice was lower now, filled with restrained passion. Vanessa felt her heart beat faster, her pulse quickening in ways she hadn't anticipated. She wanted to respond, to tell him she had never thought of anyone else, that in truth, her thoughts were often consumed by him, but the words caught in her throat. She had always admired Dominic from a professional distance, secretly respecting his power and control. Now, that admiration was morphing into something more dangerous, something that could burn her if she let it. Dominic's hand reached across the desk, stopping just short of touching hers, a teasing, possessive gesture that made her stomach twist. "Vanessa," he whispered. "Do you even realize what you do to me? How even the smallest interaction with someone else makes my blood boil?" His words sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of fear and something she couldn't name. She felt drawn to him, despite knowing the dangers, despite knowing that a single misstep could turn this storm into a whirlwind she might not survive. The office door opened suddenly, breaking the charged silence. A junior associate peeked in, nervous and fumbling, clearly aware of Dominic's presence and the tension in the room. Dominic's eyes narrowed, and Vanessa noticed the subtle shift in his posture, protective, alert, commanding. "Leave us," he said simply. The man nodded quickly and disappeared, closing the door behind him. Vanessa exhaled softly, realizing how close she had been to losing herself in Dominic's gaze. Alone again, Dominic leaned back, a faint smirk playing at his lips. "You can't imagine the danger you're in, Vanessa. Not from outside threats. The world has plenty, but from me. I can't control myself when it comes to you. You walk into my life, laughing, smiling, unaware of the storm you've stirred, and I—" His voice faltered slightly, revealing a rare crack in his otherwise impenetrable armor. Vanessa's chest tightened. She had glimpsed a vulnerability beneath the domineering exterior, a side of Dominic that no one else ever saw. She hesitated, then spoke softly, almost afraid her words would provoke him. "Dominic, I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking about anyone else." Her words were rushed, stumbling, but genuine. Dominic's gaze softened just a fraction, enough for her to notice the fleeting warmth in his eyes before it hardened again into the familiar intensity she had come to recognize. "Good," he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "Because from now on, Vanessa, I don't want you anywhere near anyone else. Ever, understand?" The command was clear, undeniable. Vanessa nodded, her stomach tightening at the possessiveness, at the undeniable attraction that lingered between them. She wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but the truth was she didn't want to. Not really. The hours passed in a blur of work, each glance and subtle touch between them charged with unspoken tension. Vanessa found herself constantly aware of Dominic's presence, the way he leaned slightly when she entered the room, the way his eyes seemed to follow her without overtly starring. Each interaction was a delicate dance, fraught with desire and danger, and Vanessa knew she was walking a fine line. By evening, the office had emptied, leaving just the two of them. Dominic rose from his desk, walking toward her with measured steps. Vanessa felt her breath catch as he stopped only inches away, the faint scent of his cologne overwhelming her senses. His hand brushed against hers, not in the casual way of an office colleague, but with intent, with purpose. "You have no idea what it does to me, Vanessa," he murmured, his voice thick with barely restrained emotion. "To see you, to hear you laugh, to feel you, it drives me insane." His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes, and Vanessa felt a pull so strong it left her breathless. She wanted to step back, to maintain the professional barrier, but her body refused to obey. Dominic's hand finally closed around hers, firm, possessive, and the electricity between them was undeniable. "Tonight," he said softly, "I want you to know that there's no one else for me, only you." Vanessa's heart raced, and she realized that this was more than jealousy. It was claiming, possessive, and terrifyingly thrilling. As Dominic pulled back slightly, letting her breathe, Vanessa knew their dynamic had shifted irreversibly. The line between employer and secretary, between fear and desire, had blurred completely. And as the city lights outside flickered against the glass of the office, Vanessa felt a dangerous thrill, knowing that this storm, this fire between them, had only just begun. Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling of Dominic's eyes on her, even when she wasn't in his office. The city outside buzzed with life, unaware of the storm brewing within the walls of the Morty Empire. Every step she took, every small movement, felt magnified in her mind, as if the world had condensed into a single point: Dominic. She knew it was dangerous to feel this way, to allow herself to be consumed by thoughts of her boss, the man whose reputation alone could make men tremble. Yet she couldn't deny the pull that Dominic had over her, the intoxicating mix of fear and desire that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Dominic, meanwhile, was struggling with his own restraint. A part of him wanted to claim Vanessa completely, to erase any possibility of her being with another man, to show her just how much she belonged to him. But another part, The more calculating part knew the dangers of moving too fast, the potential risks of letting his obsession show too openly. The Mafia world was unforgiving, and a careless mistake could endanger both of them. Still, the thought of anyone else daring to make her smile, laugh, or even look at her the wrong way filled him with a possessive fire that was nearly unbearable. The day dragged on with tension so thick it was almost physical. Vanessa tried to focus on her work, answering calls, organizing schedules, and managing Dominic's constant demands, but her mind kept drifting to the previous night. His words, his touch, the way his gaze lingered on her, it all replayed in her mind, leaving her heart racing. She had always admired his power, his control, and his sharp mind, but now she understood there was more, an intensity that demanded attention, loyalty, and perhaps even submission. She wasn't sure she was ready for all of that, yet she couldn't deny the magnetic attraction that made her pulse quicken whenever he was near. Dominic's office door opened suddenly, breaking her thoughts. He stepped out, motioning for her to follow him. Vanessa hesitated for a brief second, aware of the tension coiling in her chest, but curiosity and the pull of his presence compelled her forward. He led her down the dimly lit corridors of the headquarters, past security cameras and silent guards, until they reached a small, private lounge rarely used by anyone. The room smelled faintly of leather and expensive whiskey, the air heavy with secrecy and anticipation. "Sit," Dominic commanded, his voice low and controlled, but Vanessa could hear the tension beneath it. She perched on the edge of a plush leather chair, heart pounding, while Dominic leaned casually against the opposite side, watching her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "You're mine, Vanessa," he said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. "Do you understand that? Not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of being the only one I want, the only one I can tolerate being near." Vanessa swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. She wanted to respond, to assure him of her loyalty and her feelings, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, unable to hide the shiver that ran down her spine. Dominic's gaze softened just slightly, a rare moment of vulnerability that made her heart ache. He was a man of immense power, yet here, in this quiet, secretive space, he was revealing a part of himself that few ever saw, the part of him consumed by desire, possessiveness, and perhaps even fear of losing her. "You don't know what it does to me," Dominic continued, stepping closer. "Seeing you with someone else, hearing your laughter directed at another man, it ignites something in me that I can barely control. And yet," his voice dropped to a whisper, thick with restrained emotion, "I can't let it consume me completely. Not yet. I need you to understand the balance of this of us." Vanessa felt her pulse race as she looked at him, trying to decipher the emotions behind those dark, piercing eyes. She realized that Dominic wasn't just a dangerous man. He was a man struggling with feelings he had never fully acknowledged, feelings that now threatened to spill over in ways neither of them could control. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the space between them, but caution, mixed with a thrill of anticipation, kept her frozen in place. Dominic's hand brushed lightly against her arm, a touch that was firm yet deliberate, and Vanessa felt an electric jolt run through her. "Tonight," he said softly, "I need to make sure you know the truth, about me, about what I feel, about what you mean to me." His gaze locked onto hers, intense and unrelenting. She felt her knees weaken slightly, the air around them thick with desire and unspoken words. The room seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a bubble of tension and longing. Vanessa's mind raced. This was dangerous, reckless, and yet she couldn't deny how right it felt to be here with him, to feel the weight of his desire, to know that she had awakened something in him that no one else ever could. She realized that Dominic's jealousy, his possessiveness, was not just a warning. It was a declaration, a promise, and perhaps even a confession of a love that was as dangerous as it was consuming. Dominic stepped closer still, his presence overwhelming, his scent intoxicating. "I want you to trust me, Vanessa," he whispered, his voice a low growl that resonated deep within her. "I want you to know that nothing and no one will come between us. Not the world, not rivals, not even your own hesitation." His words sent a shiver down her spine, a thrilling mix of fear and desire. She had never experienced a connection like this, powerful, dangerous, and utterly consuming. Her lips parted slightly, and she wanted to speak, to tell him how she felt, but Dominic didn't give her the chance. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel his breath against her skin, close enough that the world seemed to vanish around them. The unspoken tension reached a peak, a dangerous, electrifying moment where control teetered on the edge. Vanessa knew that a single misstep could ignite a fire they might never put out, yet she also understood that this was inevitable, an attraction that neither of them could deny. Dominic finally pulled back, though only slightly, his hand lingering near hers in a silent, possessive gesture. "We're in this together now," he said softly, almost reverently. "No distractions, no pretenses. You belong with me, Vanessa. Do you understand?" Her heart raced, and she nodded, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. This was more than a warning, more than a declaration. It was the beginning of a dangerous, passionate storm that neither of them could escape. As Dominic turned and walked toward the door, Vanessa remained seated, trying to steady her breathing, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. The day had begun with routine tasks, yet it had ended with a revelation that changed everything. She knew that Dominic's possessiveness, his jealousy, and his dangerous desires would shape not only her life, but the very essence of their relationship. And deep down, she realized that she didn't want it any other way. Outside the lounge, the city continued its oblivious hum, unaware that within the walls of the Morty Empire, a storm of passion, jealousy, and power was gathering. Vanessa had no idea what challenges lay ahead, what threats, what rivals, what complications. But she did know one thing: Dominic Moretti had claimed a part of her heart, and there was no turning back. The city lights outside the Moretti headquarters flickered like distant stars, but inside, the tension was more tangible than ever. Vanessa's mind raced as she tried to focus on her work, yet every movement, every sound in the office reminded her of Dominic. His possessiveness, his intensity, and the way his gaze had lingered on her earlier that day were impossible to ignore. She knew the line between professional boundaries and dangerous attraction had already blurred, and now it felt like walking a tightrope with no safety net. Dominic, meanwhile, was not one to sit idle. Even behind his calm exterior, his mind churned with thoughts of Vanessa, and a part of him was consumed by the desire to claim her completely. He knew the world they lived in was dangerous, that enemies lurked in shadows, waiting for a misstep. And yet, the risk only heightened his obsession. The thought of anyone else daring to smile at her, to make her laugh, to look at her the way he wanted to, filled him with a possessive fire that was impossible to quench. It was late in the evening when Vanessa was summoned to Dominic's private office. The guards outside gave her a curt nod, sensing the gravity of the situation even without a word being spoken. She entered, carrying herself with the usual professionalism, though her heart pounded in her chest. Dominic was standing by the window, arms crossed, the city sprawling behind him like a kingdom he ruled with quiet authority. His dark eyes turned to her, and she felt that familiar shiver run down her spine. "Vanessa," he began, voice low and measured, "I need you to understand something. This world we live in, it's not forgiving. People try to take what isn't theirs. And when it comes to you, I won't allow anyone to interfere." His words were deliberate, each syllable weighted with unspoken meaning. Vanessa felt the tension coil around her like a living thing, thrilling and terrifying all at once. "I understand," she said softly, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. She wanted to speak more, to tell him that she had no intentions beyond loyalty to him, but Dominic's gaze made her hesitate. There was something dangerous in the way he watched her, like a predator aware of both his own power and the fragility of what he desired. Dominic took a step closer, the faint scent of his cologne overwhelming her senses. "Vanessa," he whispered, almost a growl, "you have no idea what it does to me, seeing you with someone else. Even the smallest interaction ignites a fire I can barely control. And yet, I need to maintain control for now." His words sent an electric thrill through her, making her pulse race and her stomach twist in ways she couldn't explain. She swallowed hard, feeling both fear and excitement in equal measure. "Dominic, she began, but he cut her off with a raised hand, his eyes dark and unreadable. "No words are needed. I can see everything in your eyes, Vanessa. I know your thoughts, even the ones you try to hide. And I want you to know I've never felt this way about anyone." The confession left her breathless. She had always known Dominic was intense, commanding, and dangerous, but hearing him admit that she was different from anyone else he had ever known made her heart ache with anticipation. She wanted to reach out, to touch him, to close the distance between them, but she hesitated. The risk was real, the danger surrounding them palpable, and yet the pull was irresistible. Dominic's hand brushed against hers, firm yet gentle, a reminder of the line they were walking together. "Tonight," he murmured, "I need you to trust me completely. There are things you don't know, threats you haven't seen, and enemies waiting for a single mistake. But with me, you're safe. I promise." His gaze softened, revealing a rare vulnerability beneath the hardened exterior. Vanessa felt her heart swell, torn between fear and desire, knowing that whatever lay ahead, their connection had changed irreversibly. As they sat together in the quiet of the office, Vanessa felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Dominic's presence was overwhelming, his intensity almost suffocating, yet she couldn't bring herself to step back. She realized that she wanted him, not just for the protection he offered, not just for the thrill of danger, but for the undeniable connection they shared, a pull that seemed destined to defy both reason and caution. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered by a sharp knock at the door. Vanessa flinched, but Dominic didn't move immediately. He signaled with a subtle gesture, and the door opened slightly to reveal one of his trusted lieutenants. "Boss," the man said, voice low and urgent, "there's been movement near the docks, possible rivals scouting our shipments." Dominic's eyes darkened, the intensity returning instantly, and Vanessa felt a chill run through her. This was the world they lived in. The danger was never far away. "Stay here," Dominic commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Vanessa nodded, though her mind raced with the possibilities. She wanted to protest, to insist on staying close, but she knew better than to defy him. Instead, she sat, heart pounding, waiting for him to return. The minutes stretched endlessly, each second filled with anticipation, fear, and an underlying thrill that only seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. When Dominic finally returned, his expression was unreadable, though Vanessa could feel the adrenaline radiating from him. He approached her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a gesture both tender and possessive. "Everything's handled," he said simply, though the tension in his voice suggested otherwise. Vanessa felt a shiver run through her, realizing that even in moments of calm, danger lingered, and Dominic's protective instinct was unwavering. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze, and felt the weight of unspoken words between them. The jealousy, the desire, the dangerous attraction, it all hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Vanessa knew that their relationship had shifted, that boundaries had been crossed, and that the line between professional and personal was irreparably blurred. And yet, she didn't regret it. She couldn't. The connection she felt with Dominic was too powerful, too consuming to ignore. Dominic's hand found hers again, firm and possessive, and he leaned close, his voice a low whisper. "Vanessa, I don't just want to protect you, I want to claim you. Completely. No distractions, no pretenses. You're mine, do you understand?" Her breath caught in her throat, and she nodded, unable to speak. The room seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the two of them in a world of shadows, desire, and dangerous possibilities. As the night deepened, Vanessa realized that nothing would ever be the same. The tension, the jealousy, the passion, they had ignited a fire that could not be extinguished. And as she sat across from Dominic, feeling the heat of his presence and the intensity of his gaze, she knew that the storm between them had only just begun. The world outside might be dangerous, filled with enemies and uncertainty, but inside the walls of the Morty Empire, Vanessa and Dominic were locked in a dangerous dance of power, desire, and obsession, one that neither of them could escape. The night had settled over the city, wrapping the streets in shadows and the distant hum of traffic, but Vanessa's mind was far from calm. The events of the day replayed endlessly in her thoughts, the intensity of Dominic's gaze, the possessive way he had touched her hand, the low growl in his voice when he declared that she was his. She had always known that working for a Mafia king came with dangers, but now she realized that the greatest danger wasn't outside. It was him, and the storm of desire and jealousy that he carried like a weapon. She tried to steady herself as she walked through the quiet corridors of the Morty headquarters, her heels echoing against the polished marble. Every step reminded her that she was treading a line that few survived unscathed. Yet the pull toward Dominic was undeniable. She wanted to resist, to maintain professionalism, to remind herself of the boundaries she had always upheld. But each memory of his touch, each glance of possessive intensity, made her pulse race in defiance of reason. Dominic, in contrast, was already aware of her presence even before she entered his office. He could feel it, the subtle shift in the air, the electricity that seemed to accompany her every movement. He had spent the evening reviewing reports, planning operations, and keeping an eye on threats, but none of that mattered as much as the magnetic pull Vanessa held over him. Her mere presence ignited a fire in him that was equal parts dangerous and irresistible. "Vanessa," he called softly when she stepped inside, his voice carrying a tone of authority softened by longing. She stopped mid-step, her breath hitching slightly at the sound. His eyes, dark and commanding, locked onto hers, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. Every inch of her wanted to move closer, to close the gap between them, yet caution and the weight of the world they lived in held her frozen. Dominic's stride was deliberate as he approached her, each step measured yet filled with intent. He stopped only a foot away, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body. "Do you know what it does to me, seeing you hesitate?" he murmured, voice low and rough. Vanessa's chest tightened. She felt the raw edge of his desire in every word. "It makes me want to erase every other thought from your mind, to make you mine completely." Her hands trembled slightly, and she tried to steady herself against the edge of the desk. "Dominic, she began, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to confess, to admit that she, too, felt the pull, that she had been captivated by his intensity from the first day she had stepped into this office. But there was danger in such honesty, a risk that the line between their professional and personal lives could vanish entirely. Dominic, sensing her hesitation, leaned closer. His hand brushed hers lightly, a deliberate, possessive gesture that sent shivers up her arm. "I don't want words," he said, voice dropping to a whisper, thick with restrained emotion. "I want action, I want your trust. I want you to understand that there's no one else. Not now, not ever." The intensity in his gaze left her breathless, her thoughts spinning, as the reality of his possessive nature became impossible to ignore. The quiet of the office was punctuated only by the soft hum of the city outside. Vanessa realized that each passing second felt charged, electric, as if time itself had slowed to highlight the dangerous chemistry between them. Dominic's presence was overwhelming, a mix of authority and desire that made her heart beat loud in her ears. She could feel the weight of his obsession, the fire behind his control, and the undeniable truth that they were now bound together in a dance of power, passion, and peril. Suddenly, Dominic straightened, his attention snapping outward as his senses picked up a subtle shift in the atmosphere. He turned sharply toward the door, alert and tense. Vanessa followed his gaze, sensing the shift in the air, an unspoken warning that danger was never far away. It was the life they lived. Every moment, every choice carried risk, and Dominic had learned to read it instinctively. He moved to the desk, picking up his phone and speaking in hushed, urgent tones to one of his trusted lieutenants. Vanessa watched, heart pounding, as he orchestrated a plan with precision, his commanding presence leaving no room for error. When he finally hung up, he turned back to her, his expression a blend of command and vulnerability. "We're not safe yet," he said softly, almost apologetically. "But neither of us is leaving this room tonight without acknowledging this." He gestured subtly between them, the unspoken tension electric. Vanessa felt her chest tighten as the weight of his words settled over her. He wasn't just a boss. He was a man consumed, obsessed, and entirely aware of the dangerous line they were walking. Vanessa's lips parted, and she finally found her voice. "Dominic, I trust you," she whispered, her words trembling but sincere. I want this too, but we need to be careful." Her admission seemed to ignite something in him, a rare, fleeting smile breaking across his features before the intensity returned. He closed the distance between them, not forcefully but with deliberate intent, until they stood just inches apart. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing against her cheek in a possessive yet gentle motion. "Vanessa," he murmured, voice low and commanding, "you have no idea what you do to me. You make me want to defy every rule I've ever lived by. You make me lose control." She could feel the heat of his body, the electricity in the room, and the thrill of danger mingling with desire. Her own hands trembled slightly as she reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear, daring to touch him in a moment that felt both reckless and inevitable. Dominic's eyes darkened, his possessive instinct flaring as he leaned closer, the tension between them almost unbearable. The world outside faded. There was no Morty empire, no city, no danger, only the two of them, suspended in a fragile balance of desire and restraint. Vanessa realized that Dominic's jealousy, his intensity, and his obsession were not just warnings. They were confessions of a deep, consuming love, dangerous and intoxicating. And she couldn't deny that she felt the same pull, the same irresistible draw toward a man who was as deadly as he was passionate. Finally, Dominic pulled back just slightly, leaving only a breath space between them. "Tonight," he said softly, "you will understand. You and I, there's no turning back. We're bound by this, by desire, by danger, by everything in between. Do you feel it too?" Vanessa nodded, her heart racing, realizing that she did. Every glance, every touch, every stolen moment had built to this, a collision of desire and danger that neither of them could escape. As Dominic leaned back, his hand still lingering near hers, Vanessa knew that the storm between them had reached a new level. It was no longer just jealousy or possessiveness. It was something deeper, more consuming, a bond forged in fire and shadow. And as they sat in the quiet of the office, hearts pounding, she realized that nothing would ever be the same. Their lives, their hearts, and their world had changed forever, and the fire that had ignited between them threatened to consume everything. The city outside seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside the walls of the Morty Empire. Vanessa's thoughts were a whirlwind of adrenaline, desire, and fear. The tension between her and Dominic had been building for days, jealousy, possessiveness, and unspoken longing, creating a fragile, electrifying bond that neither could ignore. Tonight, however, felt different. Tonight felt like a reckoning, a moment where boundaries would blur entirely, and the delicate balance between desire and danger would either solidify or shatter completely. Dominic stood by the window, dark silhouette against the city lights, his posture radiating power and intensity. Vanessa watched him, heart hammering in her chest, knowing that every step she took toward him was a step into a world where passion and peril collided. The air between them was thick, charged with a magnetic pull that neither distance nor logic could resist. Every instinct in her screamed caution, yet every fiber of her being drew her closer to him. He turned slowly, eyes locking onto hers with a possessive intensity that made her knees weak. "Vanessa," he murmured, voice low and velvety with danger and desire, "we've spent too long dancing around this. Too long pretending that rules, threats, or the world outside could separate us. But the truth is you belong to me, and I won't let anyone, anything take you from me." His words wrapped around her like a vice, thrilling and terrifying all at once. Vanessa's breath hitched. She wanted to respond, to protest, to assert her independence, but the heat of his gaze silenced her. She had always respected Dominic, feared him in ways most people couldn't understand, and yet here she was, drawn to him in a way that defied logic. I belong to you too," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her racing heartbeat. The admission felt dangerous, reckless, but it was true. She wanted him fully, without hesitation, despite the risks. Dominic's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "Good," he said softly, stepping closer until the space between them vanished. The scent of his cologne enveloped her, intoxicating and overwhelming, and her fingers itched to touch him, to feel the weight of his presence. His hand reached for hers, and when their fingers intertwined, it was not a casual gesture. It was a claim, a promise, a warning to the world that she was his. "Tonight," he whispered, brushing his thumb along the back of her hand, "I want you to understand just how far this goes. How much I'll protect you, desire you, and claim you. No one will interfere. No one will dare." His voice was both commanding and tender, a paradox that left her breathless. Vanessa's pulse raced as she felt the intensity of his emotions, raw and unfiltered, coursing through the room like a living thing. The danger of their lives was never far away, yet in this moment, the threat seemed distant, inconsequential compared to the fire igniting between them. Dominic's hand moved to her face, cradling it with an intensity that was both possessive and reverent. "Vanessa," he murmured, voice rough with emotion, "I've never wanted anyone like this. I've never felt a need so deep, a desire so consuming. You're not just a part of my world, you're my world." Vanessa felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of the emotions between them. She had always been cautious, measured, careful, and yet Dominic had stripped away every layer of restraint, leaving her exposed, alive, and entirely vulnerable. She wanted to step back to protect herself, but the pull was irresistible. Every fiber of her being ached to be near him, to surrender to the storm of desire, protection, and passion that had defined their connection from the start. Dominic leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against hers. "I won't let anything hurt you," he whispered, his voice barely audible yet filled with unshakable resolve. "Not rivals, not the world, not even our own fears. You're mine, Vanessa, and I'm yours completely." The sincerity and intensity of his words left her breathless. In that moment, she understood the depth of his obsession, his jealousy, and his unwavering devotion. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly consuming. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, memorizing every detail, every curve, as if trying to anchor herself to the reality of him. I trust you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Completely." The admission was a surrender, a gift of herself in a way that both terrified and thrilled her. Dominic's eyes darkened with emotion, and a smile, a rare, soft smile, touched his lips as he closed the final distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and filled with the intensity of weeks of longing and suppressed desire. It was a kiss of claim, of warning, of passion, and of connection. Vanessa felt herself melting into it, every fear, every hesitation falling away, leaving only the undeniable truth. They were meant for each other, in this dangerous, thrilling, unforgiving world. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Dominic rested his forehead against hers once more. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Not just us, everything." Vanessa nodded, understanding the weight of his words. Their relationship was no longer a secret, no longer confined by professionalism or caution. It was a bond forged in fire, in jealousy, in danger, and in passion, a bond that would define the rest of their lives. The night stretched on, the city outside silent witnesses to their claim, their surrender, and their unspoken promises. Dominic's possessiveness softened into tenderness as he held her close, whispering assurances, vows, and declarations of desire. Vanessa realized that the danger surrounding them, the world of shadows and rivals, could never extinguish the fire between them. In fact, it made it burn brighter, fiercer, and more unyielding. By dawn, Vanessa knew that her life had changed irrevocably. The line between fear and passion had vanished, replaced by trust, surrender, and an undeniable bond with a man who was as dangerous as he was devoted. Dominic Moretti was no longer just her boss, no longer just a figure of power. He was the storm that had claimed her heart, the protector and lover she had always secretly longed for, and the man whose jealousy, desire, and intensity she would never escape, nor would she want to. And as the first light of morning filtered through the windows, illuminating the two of them entwined in a quiet embrace, Vanessa understood the truth of it all. In a world of danger, power, and shadows, their love was the one fire that could never be tamed. It was fierce, consuming, and eternal, a flame forged in jealousy, obsession, and undeniable passion, destined to burn forever.